Welcome to another edition of the Empower Hour. I am Al Kumar.
And I'm Hanifa.
And we are your hosts each and every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. where we come to you with impactful topics of discussion that affect our everyday lives. No topic is taboo here on the Empower Hour. And so this one will be no different. We have a special studio guest here with us. My friend, my good friend, Brother Ken Walker Bey is here. I like how you do it. How you do it? And he's here to talk to us about correcting the story. So oftentimes we hear a lot more recently than days past how a lot of things that we've been taught throughout the years, throughout our lives, we're now coming to grips with the realization that a lot of it is either half-truths or straight out lies.
Absolutely.
So we're going to dig into that today. And I wanted to have you in particular on this program for this particular topic, Ken, because I really admire your method of teaching. I think you be teaching and don't even realize you be teaching. Yeah, whenever we always having conversations, and I like the way you it's never for you. It's never I never get you're wrong. You need to stop thinking that way. You need to do this. This is the proper way. You have a very mild-mannered way of sharing your wisdom. And another thing I admire about you is that you're not afraid to say you don't know. I come to you sometimes and with conversations and questions can get difficult, and you will actually say, I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that. And I admire that because there's so much these days that a lot of us, we don't have that skill. We will make up things before we actually decide or we actually conclude that we don't know. So Ken, I admire your method of teaching.
Well, thank you so much.
Welcome, Ken.
Hanifa.
So if Hanifa wanted to say something, we'll jump right into the conversation. Okay. And my first question is, what have we been lied to about?
Well, first, let me thank our two lovely hosts, Sister Alkamar, Sister Hanifa, for having me on today. Definitely an honor and privilege. I spent a lot of time talking and exchanging with these young ladies, and really enjoyed the dialogue. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, for me, this has been a lifelong quest. And not to take up too much time, but just how I came to this place, or the place of being a student and a researcher of history, and specifically history as it deals with our people, mm-hmm. the melanated diaspora. Mm-hmm. And even in, as a young person, a young child in church, because I grew up in a very fundamental Pentecostal mm-hmm. background. My mom was a preacher, actually. She was a evangelist. My dad was probably the opposite end of the spectrum, but my mom, we were in church 4 or 5 times a week. Mm. We were very, but even that, it served a purpose, but it also, in addition to like a fundamental and foundational teaching from religious and kind of the more spiritual principles, it also allowed, kind of, for me, I guess, ignited, there got to be more to the story. Even as a child, I can remember thinking, I hear what you're teaching me. Mm-hmm. I see it, but I think there's more to the story. Mm-hmm. And then for me, that's been kind of the driving force between everything that I've, done it when it comes to, researching information history. And, and you mentioned before, kind of the way in which, when I'm exchanging or talking to folks, because, for me, I consider myself more student than teacher. Mm-hmm. And I think the most effective way we learn is through exchange. So for me, I think everybody can learn something from everybody.
Right.
No matter who you're talking to.
Right.
I mean, and I know from personal experience, I've learned something from talking to somebody who may be considered kind of a cast-off, bum on the street. I mean, you never know where people's life paths have taken them to where they are currently.
Right.
So everybody has something, I think, to bring. And so I think there's value in that. You
Yeah.
know, there's value in the exchange, and I think that's important for us as a people. You know, kind of getting to your question, what have we been lied about? What have been the lies we've been told? I mean, it's probably easier to start with where haven't we been lied?
Wow.
I mean, you know, there's probably no area of historical, relevance especially for us, and even in a more grander context, that there has not been missing or malinformation or just straight out lies. And even with a lie, effective lie is only, effective is based on a kernel of truth, So I mean, and the reason for that is, of course, and besides the obvious, and then including the obvious, that there's certain folks who tell the story, his story, that have an agenda, and oftentimes the story is told to suit their political, social, economic agenda.
What is the agenda?
Well, the agenda is kind of multifold. I mean, the political, social, and economic. So the three kind of interplay.
Okay.
To support one another. And so we can look at our own story as probably the epitome and probably the most glaring illustration of how a story has been told and basically people have been recast, because we're not who we actually were, in antiquity, and even in closer, and in nearer term antiquity.
Let me dig into that a little bit. When you said we are not who we used to be,
Right.
What when you say that, what do you mean? What is the difference between who we are today versus who we used to be?
Okay, so this gets into the whole issue of when we get to our history beyond slavery. In this country, our educational system, and especially for us, the way in which we're educated and indoctrinated into this culture, we're taught from slavery forward. And I'm sure everybody who's been through any kind of educational training, for whatever you remember or don't remember, however much you paid attention or didn't pay attention, that you weren't taught very much beyond slavery, if any.
Good teacher.
And even what you were taught about slavery was glossed over and really kind of like, a very, very generalized.
The I have a dream speech.
I have a dream, but and even it's I would say that probably is a different thing, because that's kind of like, it's the different same concept where you can decode, something, to satisfy the agenda, but I think that's more to satisfy and talk about the kinks from the jagged edges that is the blatant lies and basic social engineering that's done to get us all to kind of accept. That's acceptance. The I have a dream. Let's lock arms and sing Kumbaya. And, okay, we know some bad things happened in the past, but we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll deal with a little bit about it. But let's it's more important to move forward.
You listed three things. You said it's political, social, and economical.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even spiritual.
Can we go through
Yeah, even spiritual
And
too.
spiritual.
I don't claim those to be all inclusive, but those, from my observation, have been some of the major areas that the manipulation has taken place in order to reach whatever agenda at the end they want. That's purported or pushed for by the powers that be.
Well, can we go through those three that you just listed, and can you tell us, like, what would you say is one of the biggest lies and impact that you're seeing? So let's start with political, for example.
Right.
What would you say in the political arena? What is one of the biggest lies you're seeing affecting melanated people in the diaspora today?
One of the biggest lies.
One that has the biggest impact.
The biggest impact.
Politically.
Yeah.
I'll tell you probably the most poignant one for me recently, because it's you can go down the line and it's endless. But when you study what happened during Reconstruction and the Freedmen's Bureau, and for me specifically, this deals more with economics, what happened with the Freedmen's Bank.
What happened?
So basically, just kind of an overview. After slavery was abolished in the Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation.
This is what the Freedmen's Bank?
The Freedmen's Bank.
Freedmen's Bank. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So as part of Reconstruction was basically where we were to be restored, given that this where you hear the term, hear the concept of 40 acres and a mule.
Mm-hmm.
So that term, that idea was really more of a concept more than a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what was supposed to happen was this Freedmen's Bank was set up so that what we were given and what we would do for restitution, we could put it in this bank to help seed and start to get us back on our feet.
Yes.
So we could kind of reacclimate, reorient ourselves into the new,
Black people.
okay.
Okay.
Black people,
Right.
ex-slave people,
Okay.
and so.
Who created this bank?
It was created by a proclamation. It started by a proclamation in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a government thing, but when it was initially started, through mismanagement, and that is a story in and of itself, the bank did not do well.
Okay.
So Frederick Douglass and he had some other investors. They invested their own personal money into the Freedmen's Bank in order to make it sustainable, to help it reach, the intended objective of helping our people get online. But, in a lot of cases, and I have to tend to agree with this, that was an example where the South did rise again. Because a lot of those forces that were supposedly defeated during the Civil War, they were able to, through political means, able to marginalize basically what the bank was able to do, and the bank eventually folded. So and it was a travesty because not only did it wasn't just a bank folding, but it was basically the life savings of all the folks that had put their money and invested in this bank. It just totally went to nothing. There was no FDIC, no insurance. People lost everything.
How did they do that politically?
Basically through the way they passed legislation, and basically by they usually with banks, the banks are bolstered by the political system, kind of insurance. You're familiar with the FDIC, the
Yes.
insurance. So they didn't necessarily have an FDIC then, but what they did have was guarantees and
Yeah.
the systems of guarantors for banking assets.
Okay.
The Freedmen's Bank was completely unprotected, and that was on purpose.
Design.
By design. Other banking institutions were completely, had all the necessary firewalls, protections, protocol
Wow.
to protect the assets. The Freedmen's Bank was not protected.
I didn't know that story, but you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Black Wall Street when
Yes.
they went in and bombed the whole city,
Right.
and the people were trying to get insurance from fire insurance because they lit fires to all the homes and businesses and all that. And so when all the dust settled and the people who used to own them homes and businesses went to file a claim, to claim the insurance claim that they've been paying on
Right.
the whole time they've been there, they were denied over and over and over and
Sure
over
was.
again.
That's right. Absolutely.
They were denied by the powers to be.
That's
That
right.
reminds me of
Yes.
that story.
And another example of how the social, the political, and the economic all interplay and have interplayed and been used in conjunction with one another against us,
Right.
to marginalize us, to basically, put us in a position of where, we are unable to really rise above anything except, really poverty and, and devastation in our community. We start talking about, even like we going back to, we talked about.
It's hit
So-
okay.
so-
Some emergency.
So Trump alert.
Is that a Trump alert?
The Trump alert.
Yeah. Wow. Presidential alert just came through on all the cell phones.
Yeah,
Is
he's-
he really testing that,
Yeah, he's
huh?
testing. Yeah. they're
Yeah.
testing.
So I'm thinking he's trying to get around the media and talk to the people directly. That's the impression
It
I
could
get.
be. That would be
Let
really
me hit
interesting.
okay on this. Sorry, guys. Wow. That's
What-
interesting.
You were just mentioning just the agenda from the beginning to like marginalize us.
Yes.
Why us?
Well,
Because we talk about this a lot and
Yes.
just I understand the history from slavery onward,
Yes.
that most of us know or have been
Yeah.
fed. And I can understand having a use for us at one point and then no longer having a use for us, but still having a use for us today just looks
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
But it's almost like why melanated people?
Well, we were the first. I mean, we were the first on Earth, and that
So
besides just the obvious. I'm sorry. Go
No, I
ahead.
was gonna say you're that mad, being
Well,
that we're the first.
it kind of goes to a lot of the story of
Cain and Abel.
he's a Cain and Abel of the birthright
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
The firstborn. There's
No.
always that jealousy of the
Yeah,
firstborn.
that's not Cain and Abel.
Is it
but that's,
Esau and, Isaac?
Isaac. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so.
Sure know this.
Don't do
I'm
that.
glad she did.
Yeah.
I
Don't do
needed
that.
the assist,
Oh,
you know?
story.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
That's
but
what's up, though. I've heard it.
it goes a lot to that issue of firstborn,
Mhm.
and beyond just the issue of being firstborn. Firstborn brings certain inherent things with it. So we were the first to develop civilization. We were the first to be in rulership of civilization.
Mhm.
So that means at one point it was carbon copy of what it is today. We were on top. They were on the bottom.
Hmm.
So during that time, and see, that's where the historical perspective is important. It's important to understand how when we ruled, what that place was, and kind of how things transpired through, ancient, through the dynasties, throughout Kemetic and Egyptian, Egyptian dynasties, and how for millennia they were, trying to, find their place and rise above the bottom station that they were in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really want to get in and start to really study that, a good place to look is, of course, the Roman Empire, and also, but even also the Crusades.
Mm-hmm.
It took them thousands of years, and a lot of times you hear the talk, and then education goes along the lines of they were fighting against the Turks or the Arabs, Well, they don't tell you a lot about, who those folks were. I mean, most of those folks, they were, what we call today Africans.
Mm.
So when you talk about Arab, that term is a fairly new term. I mean, that term is a 20th century term.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about, what they call Arabs. The Arabs are still the downstream mix of Africa.
Yeah, because my mind goes to when I hear Middle East and I hear Arab, all that's Africa.
Yeah, all that's
So
Africa.
if we were the original,
We were the
and
original.
and we all migrated out of Africa, and then how did the Arab become his complexion or an Arab?
Well,
Or even some oppressors of melanated people as well.
right.
History tells us that. Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
history tells us that. I mean, and
Exactly.
and if you go back far enough in history, you'll see where we, as the original progenitors of civilization, were the oppressors.
I was gonna say, didn't we do
We
some
were bad.
dirt?
We
Didn't
were
we
bad.
I was about to say, didn't we do some
you brought
dirt?
that up.
Because
Yeah.
it sounds like somebody's feelings are hurt.
Yes.
I'm
And
glad
there's
you
some
brought that up.
dysfunction when it comes to that, and there's a lot of, I think that plays into.
We gloss over that.
So
stuff.
Yeah,
yes,
We
we
romanticize.
We
yeah.
do. We have
Right.
these rose-colored glasses
Yeah.
about our history, as
Yes.
if we were just these,
Because
Yeah.
you know why?
Flawless.
Because
Yeah.
it's like having when you see like siblings fight or just a fight in general, right?
Right.
So you see the fight, and for most of us watching, right? After the outcome of the fight, we think the outcome of the fight lets us know who started the fight,
Right.
and that's not true.
Right.
Because the person who started the fight could be the one with a busted eye and a busted lip,
Right.
right? That don't make them the victim. They
Yes.
started the fight.
Good
Yes.
point.
So
a
that's
good
what
point.
can happen a lot of
Good point.
times. It's not because we somehow at some point lost somewhere means that we're innocent, that we didn't do anything at all.
Right.
Because when you
Excellent
look in
point.
history, I'm just like, no, we kind of did some dirt.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Yes,
Yeah.
we most certainly did. You
Yeah,
know,
and that hits correcting the story, because that
correcting the
is
story.
part of it. We like to take the story that of all the victimization that we've been, privy,
Yes.
had heaped on us,
Yes.
but we don't
Very
ever go
big.
into, well, how do we find ourselves
We
in
weren't
this
all
predicament?
Right,
Yeah.
How do we
right.
find ourselves here?
Right, and that's that is so important, which goes to bolster the original theme of what we're talking about here today. Why history is important, why correcting the history is important, because it's like when you walk, like what you said, honey, when you walk into the middle of a fight, you see the fight where you step into it and the
Yeah.
outcome, but you don't understand, and you didn't see what happened prior to, and who said what and did what to each other and that kind of thing. So you don't get the whole story. I think that's the reason why history is important, because history provides a more complete picture,
Yeah,
and that's important for us now
right.
as we start to figure out how we orient ourselves to move forward, how to move from where we are to the places we want to go,
Right.
and how to fix a lot of the problems that we have, reparate, recover, all of that.
Right.
We gotta have a proper understanding of where we come from, and if we're gonna battle whatever the forces are that are impeding us from getting there, we gotta understand.
Yes.
We gotta understand completely. We can't have, what we would like for it to be,
Right.
a history that you would like to think. We got to actually have, hardcore fact and real history
Right.
in order to have a sound foundation and footing to step off in the direction we need to go next.
And admitting that melanated people in our history at some point we were the oppressors of
Yeah.
at some points
Yes,
in history. It doesn't mean that. I think a big part of it today, what we're seeing, is people it's not just not knowing that, but also having a mindset of we were never on top.
Yeah.
We were never on top. Like we didn't. There's no greatness attached to us,
Right.
and I think that's where the narrative being fixed,
Exactly.
is important,
Yeah.
especially for generations to come.
The hope.
The whole picture, though,
Yeah.
because it's not to say, you were oppressors at once.
Mhm.
No, what does that mean
What does that
Yeah.
mean?
going forward?
Yeah. Right.
And how were you able to be on top for such a long time?
Yes.
Right.
What caused your demise? Like
Yes.
all of these things is
Yeah.
important because it's the root of the tree.
It's the root
Where
of
are
the
you
tree.
going?
That's right.
You don't know because you don't even know where you're coming from.
That's
Right.
Right.
Right, and understanding in the context of how long we were in the position we were, how
Absolutely.
long our ancestors ruled,
Yes.
as opposed to the small sliver of time that that we've been in another position,
Yes.
in a subordinate position.
Right.
So yes, the story, is definitely the more complete story is definitely important for those reasons you stated.
Yeah.
Also for the fact to study and learn from mistakes.
Yes.
Because we made a lot of
Good.
mistakes,
Good.
from the fact that it took the Europeans thousands, the quote unquote Europeans, thousands of years to break through and defeat the Turk, or what we call Muslim forces during the Crusades,
It
which
did.
basically you're talking about that was the defeat of the melanated world. That was basically the beginning of the turning of non-melanated folks starting to ascend to power, and them defeating the current regime that was the previous regime, which was the melanated diaspora. So one thing we've got to learn from that and looking at that is, how did that happen? How do we fall from grace? And one of the things that you got, and looking at it, that you must look at is the infighting. That was one of the key elements that led to the demise of so many, as a whole of our reign as the rulers of civilization, and even in smaller, tribes and dynasties and groups. It was the infighting. We somehow we fighting amongst us as melanated African people. And then also even with the Arab brothers. I mean, you'll see a lot in history where it talks about at some point there was a divide, and that really was the break in the Crusades when there was this faction of the groups, the Turks, the Moors, the African groups that helped and made deals with the Europeans.
But Kenny, I
They
have a
compromise.
question. When I'm listening to you talk about history, and I'm thinking about like I was really into church history, and you
Yeah.
can't really dig into church history without getting into the Crusades and the
Oh, yeah.
Inquisitions.
That's
and
what it was
everything.
about. Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
and just war after
A
war
lot of
after
it.
war, even amongst themselves,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So as you're talking, I'm like, so was this ever really about skin color or just power and conquest? Because that's really what was happening. You have something I want,
Right.
and I'm just gonna come in and fight you, and may the best man win, and I'll take it from you.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying it's right, but I'm
Yeah.
coming in and saying you just have a little more than me, and I need that. I'm not even looking at your skin color.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at what you have.
Yeah.
Or was it about our melanin?
I think it was the combination.
Okay.
It was a combination. I mean, I think because, and actually, I'll bring this into the discussion. And looking at, even some of the Moorish history, one of the things that we know about Moorish culture is that one of the prominent aspects of the Moorish royalty courts, they had concubines, and a lot of those concubines were the non-melanated, or the white, what we call white women.
Mhm.
So they were like the original sex slaves, So that's, and as a matter of fact, that's where that term slave comes from. The Slovakian,
Slav, yeah. Mhm.
That's the etymology. Look at the etymology of that word. That's where it comes from. Those women were the first. And so, again, kind of one of the we started as we started to become lax and even kind of lazy about maintaining some of our own moral standards, our own societal standards, and then of course, not just the fact they were there, but the way they were treated, that story of Abraham and Hagar.
Mhm.
If you look at that story, it gives you a glimpse into what that really was, what that really that type of thing was about. Where Abraham was the kind of the ruler of the nations, and he had, he had his own, his wife Sarah, but she was king of the concubines and whatever. She offered Hagar because she didn't
Right.
think she could have a child.
Right.
And so,
Hagar is property.
pro-
She's property.
Yeah.
Hagar, because if
Yeah.
you could just offer
Off-
someone up to your husband, that person is property.
his property, and and Hagar and Ishmael, they generally that is considered to be the seed of the
Arabs.
Arab line, the Arab bloodline, so to speak.
So, if you guys are just joining us, we are talking to Ken Walker Bey and about correcting the story, just correcting some of the historical stories that we've been told over the years, and finding out if, are they true, are they not, and why do we need to know. The number, if you want to get into this discussion, is 240-455-5934. If you want to call, you have any questions for Brother Ken, 240-455-5934. Staying on the topic of religion. How important is that Bible to our story, to our historical journey?
That's our book.
Okay.
I mean, when I say our book, I mean, that is an ancient book. It's, and even in the inconsistencies and some of the things that have, the dysfunctional things that have happened in the book has been,
Are you Christian?
No.
I just wanted
No, I'm
to clear that up, but go ahead.
No, I'm not. Now I was raised Christian. I was, and there was a time when I probably was maybe even anti-Christian. I mean, but I think as I've gone through the stages and started to understand that, like we said before, even in lies, there's some kernel of truth for it to be effective. So religion has been one of the main vehicles that has been used because of the way and the place that it holds in society with people. That is one of the few institutions and few conceptual entities that is sacrosanct for most people.
Yeah.
It is.
If you,
Yeah.
if you can penetrate and control the religion for most people, for most groups of people, then you're gonna control the people. Besides the economy, that probably is one of the most powerful tools. I would say even more than politics in a lot of cases, and in conjunction, it's extremely powerful.
Wow.
So
When you say the Bible is our book.
it's our book. It's the, if you do the etymology of the Holy Bible, it is a sum book. In the book, it talks about, and especially when you understand its history, and you're looking at it now. If you ever ask me, is it a literal history book?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. No,
Okay.
it is not a literal history book. But what it does give us is it does give us historical context and some historical markers that we can use to go back and line that up with its history, and it tells the story in a more metaphorical, allegorical
But
sense.
the story is choppy though, because
Yeah.
it's like what do you call it? What do they call this in college when you when you get in trouble for stealing someone's work?
Plagiarism.
Plagiarism. But it's like plagiarism of many texts.
Yes.
It's like stories taken from so many different
Yeah,
texts,
yes.
lumped together
Yeah.
to create one story. Because you can look at certain things in the Old Testament and be like,
Yeah.
that sounds familiar,
Yeah.
but that's not really what happened. And then you're like, but this part happened somewhere else. But it's all lumped together.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's still the text that they're taken from is still us.
Right. The root.
Right, the root,
It's
right.
still-
Root of the story.
Yes. Now I'll be the last one to sit here and pound on the table and tell you the King James version of the Bible
Right,
is
right.
the end all be all, unadulterated word of
Infallible
God.
word of God.
Infallible word. No, I'm not gonna tell you that. I don't believe that for myself.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
but what I can say is that if you are a true study, a scholarly, if you're interested in scholastic study of biblical text, you don't stop with the Bible. You may start there, but you've got to study where did the Bible come from.
Right.
You know.
And I believe that is why we get so caught up in today, is because we don't go beyond
Yes.
that book.
Yes.
And so if you don't go beyond it, it's easy to believe that this is the undisputed, undeniable
Right.
word of God, because
Right.
you don't have anything else to pull from.
Yes.
It's in the fabric of the society that we live in too, because when you talk about religion, even the non-religious are still religious. Like a lot of
Yes.
things that they do,
Yeah.
you ask, well, why do you feel that way or believe that way about that thing? And they don't realize the root of it is religion.
Yeah.
That's right.
You know,
It's
that
ingrained.
thought, it's ingrained, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, so as
Yes.
even the non-religious, you're like, but you do this.
Right.
You know, so
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's a good point. We want to jump into some promos real quick and share with you guys where we are and what we do here at Everlasting Life, which is located at 9185 Central Avenue in Capitol Heights, Maryland. We are inside of the eLife Studios. We do a lot of different things here at Everlasting Life Vegan Restaurant and Lounge, such as on Thursday nights, children eat free. So if you have a child 12 and under, bring them on out to Everlasting Life and allow them a healthy, wholesome meal free of charge, as long as they're within a paying accompanied adult. They do eat free, and then they mix and mingle with other children in the lounge area. It becomes a big playroom for them. So come on out for Children's Night on Thursdays from 6 to 8 p.m. Excuse me. Following that up is our dinner and a movie. I normally host that event each and every Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. You grab a bite to eat in the cafe side and come on, sit down in the lounge and enjoy a very informative movie or documentary. And then right after, we have a discussion about what was aired. And the discussion part is always fascinating, always some interesting people in the room. Ken normally comes through. He's through more often than not. And so come on out and join us. That's each and every Friday for our dinner and a movie from 7 to 9 p.m. Every first Saturday of the month is our Black Wall Street Renaissance that takes place right here at Everlasting Life from 12 to 6 p.m. Each and every first Saturday of the month, all day shopping. We have a really good time. We have different vendors to come out. You can shop right here locally, keeping that dollar circulating right here in our own communities. And then we open up the stage for different lecturers or events, entertainment. This first Saturday, which is upcoming, we'll have Sir Charles Carey in the house with us. He's going to be lecturing about changing the brain. And wait a minute, am I saying that right? Something about rewiring the brain.
Neuro-linguistic program.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but come on out. That starts at 2 o'clock from 2 to 4 p.m. It's always free. That's our Black Wall Street Renaissance. Third Saturday of the month, we have our marketplace. So if you're in the market for fresh fruit, produce, herbs, spices, vegan groceries, natural supplements, things of that nature, you want to be here every third Saturday from 11 to 4 p.m. for our marketplace that takes place there. Then it's always free. Again, we're here in the eLife Studios. Broadcasting call is going out. If you're interested in hosting your own program, give us a call. The starting fee is only $25 an hour. That's unheard of. You're not going to find that price anywhere else. So that includes full engineering for your 1-hour program. So call us or visit us online on the elifestudios.com for more information on that. Okay, if you want to call, we're at 240-455-5934 to jump in on a discussion. We're talking to Ken Walker Bey about correcting the story. All right, where were we? The
Talking
religion
about
part.
religion, very important topic.
What is underneath the Vatican Church in Rome?
You been there?
I've never been there. I've never been to Italy.
The theory,
But
though.
I know folks who have been.
Okay,
I don't know if they've been in the basement of the Vatican, but I mean, it's documented fact that the Vatican's in the basement are miles and miles and miles of historical artifacts. Now, what are some of those artifacts? It can run the gamut of you name it, whatever. So for us, that's particularly important because if again, understanding history and understanding history of your religion, that's just very important.
Yes.
So understanding the history of the Catholic Church, where the Catholic Church originated from. So if you study the origins of the Catholic Church and you understand and start to understand concepts about our ancient history, you'll start to get an idea of probably some of the things that are in that basement that relate to some of our history and our ancestral story in antiquity.
And why is it in the basement and not out in the open for
Like a museum?
Yeah, in the museum for everybody to take part and see.
Control.
Why is it locked in and you can't get down there unless you have special passes, etc. From what I understand.
So I'm gonna start with the non-conspiratorial answer.
Yes.
Would be because there are so many and so much that there's no way you could display everything, right? So there's no way you could display everything. So, but I'm gonna give you probably the real and true because some of those artifacts don't support the story that they're telling.
Exactly.
Point
Control.
blank. I
Control.
mean, it does not support the story, the doctrine, or the philosophy that's put forward in the cultural thing or societal thing that's put
Right.
forward. Now, you can go and the pictures are all over. You can see where when the Pope goes to pray in the morning, he plays to a melanated Madonna and child. That's not a Mary and Jesus. It's a Madonna. It's a melanated Madonna and child. Some say in the back room is Osar and Aset. And which we know is the true origin. Where they get a lot of that story from. So to talk about what's down there and the relevance for us, those are a lot of the bookmarks and the markers for the true story. Now, what we get is his story, the history that they put it forward, but
So
a lot of that is there, is our stuff, the stuff of the ancestors. So stuff to help us get the story straight.
Most of what we're told as far as melanated people are it's information that's been given to us.
Yeah.
We're told who we are. In a sense, somebody else has created us,
Yeah.
right? If we're honest.
Yeah.
And we really, really don't know, a lot of us, who we are.
Right.
And I think this is why when you start searching, like you're saying, history, there's an unraveling that happens.
Yes.
Because your whole identity, right, is
Questioned.
and not only that, you realize that you really didn't really play a part in it. You think you did. You think those were your thoughts,
Yeah.
right? But the books you read, like you said, the indoctrination into this society, which we call education, plays a part in that, and we don't know. We don't know that that's happening. That programming, just like television.
Yeah.
You know, you all of a sudden you watch a commercial and you're like, I feel like a fish sandwich now. But that fish sandwich commercial done been on 6 times
Right.
in that
Right.
1 hour that you've been
Right.
in front of the television, and all of a sudden you have this appetite,
Right.
right? So when you talk about the guy coming with the brain, I was like, this is exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we don't really understand how that works and
Correct.
how programming works and how things can, your behavior could be affected without your consent.
Manipulation.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what music does,
So
doesn't
much-
it?
so much of
That's-
that goes on.
exactly.
So much.
So when someone who decides to go on that journey that you're talking about,
Yeah.
2 things: where can someone start, and what can they expect? Can they expect to be hindered, or people trying to get them away from seeking, from searching?
Yeah.
Do people lose their minds on these journeys? Yeah, they do.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'll let you finish. Yes.
Yeah,
You
but
can lose
what?
your-
Yeah, go ahead.
It's, I mean, you know, anytime that you start to unpack something as complex, you know, and as, you know, as deep and wide as history, you know, it's a big forest, you know, and it can be easy to lose yourself, to get lost in that journey, you know, but that's why it's important to go about it the right way, you know, and a lot of times, you know, when we go on the quest, I think there's a spiritual component involved, because when you're on that quest, for me, I've always felt there was a spiritual component to it. So you know, for me, the always request from the creators was kind of, you know, go before me and help me go down the right path, put me around the right people, with the right things, right environment. So I think it's important when you start that, you start with a clean heart, good intention, and, you know, and that you are
And an open mind.
in an open mind. That's very important, in an open mind.
Because
It can
Yes.
false information come from anywhere too, because I know
Yes.
sometimes when you get on that quest, most people will be like, I'm not reading anything written by any white man, and I'm like, no, there's
Right.
information
No.
there too,
Yeah.
and there's misinformation written by melanated people
Yeah.
as
That's
well.
right.
Sometimes, you
Good
know,
point,
the most important, the most effective weapons against the enemy is their own, you know? So, you know, there's a lot of good references that we've gotten from, you know, some of my non-melanated brothers, for instance, about our presence here, who we were here before Columbus.
yes.
So our brother, you know, that wrote the book,
Van Sert,
I haven't read certain ones, but
Uh-huh.
there's some, you know, some of our so-called white brothers who wrote
Oh,
books.
yes.
Yeah.
You know, Unexpected Faces in Mesoamerica,
Uh-huh.
that talks about the Olmec heads.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes, yes.
and David McRitchie. I think he wrote I forget the name of the book, but he's written several texts that talk about us in antiquity. You know, how we were there. We were the original British. We Britons. You know, those were
Is
folks
it true
alone.
we were everywhere? We were
Yeah.
everywhere over this vast earth
Yeah.
before the coming of the white man.
And
the
even
so-called
even
white
being
man.
here,
Yeah.
that like every, because I used to think about this a lot, like, well, who was in America? What black people were in America before slavery? I used to think about that a lot, and then I had to look, and I'm like, not
Yeah.
every black person was brought on this soil
No.
on slave
No.
ships, and I think sometimes we
That's
forget
another-
that. That's another thing as well.
That's
Right.
another thing. That's
Right.
another thing.
That's the brother who wrote the whole book on it. They came before Columbus.
I remember certain one.
That's Van
Oh,
Sertima.
that's
Van
what
Van
it said.
Sertima.
Oh, no, the other one that we
There's a-
looked up, remember you told
David and Hotep, the first
Yes.
Americans were Africans.
Yes.
That's a very, and
Yes.
that brother did extensive research.
Right.
I mean, you know, as far as, and it's a fairly recent book. I mean, in the last 10 years, I believe that the book is was released. So I mean, that's another excellent reference that talks about our time here, and what was going on here with us, and some of the things and trends, and why why it's important, that we understand the complete history of what happens here, because it gets cast in a different frame.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of the unraveling, is that's got to happen. Is we've got to start to really understand, where we stand even here, and even here, because even here it casts a shadow on the international stage. Back to something you said earlier, we were the first here, but I would challenge anybody to tell me anywhere on the earth where non-melanated people are not the indigenous aboriginals. I don't know any place on this earth.
Me neither.
And
when I follow Runoko Rashidi,
yes.
he confirms all that.
Confirms
Because
that.
he's a world traveler. He goes around the world documenting historical evidence of where we were. I mean, he'd be in Russia finding evidence of black people in antiquity.
Even some history books that are not written that are written by non-melanated, you also see a shift if you're paying attention, because there was a point where I guess before the idea of racism was introduced, and that's kind of putting one person above the other, which means that there's an agenda attached to the whole concept of racism. Before that, when you would read documentation written by non-melanated people, when they come to the shores of certain places, certain countries, they're telling you and they're describing the people that they see there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, as you come further into history, the narratives begin to shift, where they just start straight up lying.
Yeah. Discovered.
Yeah.
Christopher Columbus discovered.
Right.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And even in Christopher Columbus, I guess you'll say his diaries.
Yes.
Yeah. There's truth in there as well. There's a lot of history written by non-melanated people that you cannot just focus on stuff that's written by melanated, because guess what? They're the ones that shifted the narrative. But you got to go back. Like you got to go into those old documents.
Yes.
And you go to the Library of Congress,
To
wherever
even
you need to
know
go to even know
that the story was shifted.
Yes.
I'll give you a good example to boast of what you're saying. Is you go back and look at the 1828 version of the Webster's Dictionary and see what the definition of an American is.
Okay.
And it basically, I'll give you kind of the Cliff Note overview of this. It basically says the copper-colored people that were here when the original settlers arrived, when Christopher Columbus arrived.
Copper-colored.
Copper-colored.
That changed. Now it
That
says what?
changed.
Now it's something different.
It's something else. It's something else now. But
Wow.
I mean, it tells you in the old, originally, you kind of to go to Hanifa's point, you can look at some of the stuff that they create, before the other agendas and other, things start to take root. And they're documented because, I mean, at some point, if you're dealing with science, you got to be dealing with fact at some point.
Yeah.
You can't deal with it.
Yeah, or you confuse yourself.
Confuse yourself, and you're going to end up.
You confuse yourself.
You're not going to end up where you intend to go if you think you're dealing with science, or you purport to deal with science, and you're not dealing with fact.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I was
Right.
talking to my son. He's like obsessed with Egypt, and he talks a lot about like the pyramids. And I was like, well, there are pyramids here, right here.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, where?
Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, you're not gonna learn high school. So I already see that coming. So,
Yeah.
but even you see, you could look at some of the structures. On the continent, and then you see, I'm not talking about the copies,
Yeah.
because you go in Washington D.C. alone, you see a lot of, some of the infrastructure that's built is taken from, from Kemet,
Right.
But when you talk about like pyramids, I'm like, what was the significance of them? Why are they all over the place, even here in America? And most people don't talk about the pyramids that are built here either.
Yes, they don't.
So even that story was changed. Now that's what the aliens.
lot to
The
that
aliens
story.
built the pyramids.
Everyone but black
According to
people.
some of the European
Right.
people.
Well, let me start out by saying, I don't ever belittle or discredit our cosmic connection. But
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
But I think there is a move, there is, you know, there tends to be, and especially when you're talking about, some of our mainstream, I'm gonna be politically correct, say our mainstream scientific community folks who are doing the studies, you know, and they wanna talk about how were these pyramids created, these magnificent, you know, wonderful structures, and, you know, and they say it couldn't have been anybody here. It could have, you know, there had to be alien intervention. Okay, well, I mean, and I won't say that it's beyond the pale that, you know, our origins, you know, we're still learning about a lot of that.
True.
We're learning about a lot of that.
True.
But as a means of saying, even if you're talking about alien intervention in that process, you know, then start to talk about some of the other things. If you want to talk about aliens, some of the other things that you know about aliens as it relates to us.
I was gonna say, if you're gonna say aliens built it, say black aliens built it.
Even recently, even
Yeah.
recently,
Give
you know,
us our credit.
Give us where the astronauts, where they talked about what those folks, those things look like that they said they encountered. That John Glenn said he encountered. What did they look like? What do they have to say about that when you know, before you get them in the room and bully them and tell them that, you know, you're gonna do whatever and all that, when they're telling you truth, you know, so it's that is something I think, you know, one we still have a lot to learn, but I think it's very important and relevant more so for us.
You mentioned cosmic connection, and I do struggle with this a little bit, and I'm just going to be honest. I don't know if it's residual stuff from church, but whatever. If it is, it is. I'm working on it. But there was when I was transitioning out of Christianity, there is an author that I used to read a lot, because I was kind of coming out of like the rituals and the traditions of Christianity and more tapping into the spiritual aspect of who I was. And there was an author that I used to read, and one of the things that he said in one of his books, it really resonated with me because I truly still believe this. He would give like stories that happened to him where someone receives a message from spirit saying, you know, take honey and whatever mixed together in a jar to this person. This person would just obey. They're not sure why. And he may have just went to his doctor and was told he had something going on in his body, and honey and is good for it. And then so when they meet, the guy brings the honey and he's like, wow, like how did you know? And he's like, well, the spirit told me to bring this with me, you know. And so when you talk about cosmic connections, do you believe that you can have people, because all the time I be like, well, you know, these people just migrated and they went over here, but is there a possibility that people can get the same messages and be in completely different parts of the world?
I agree with that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I believe there's so much we don't know.
Right.
There's
Yes.
more that we don't know.
Than what we do.
Yes, you
I
know,
agree with
this
that.
brain's a very powerful thing.
Yes.
Our human body is a
Yeah.
very complex and a very, very, you know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of unexplained mysteries in that there are unexplained things we don't know.
And the things that we're relearning too.
Yeah.
We're
We're
relearning.
relearning.
That was
We're
strict.
being reminded.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, so.
We have 2 minutes left, but I did want to ask, how does correcting the story relate to our freedom, relate to us,
Liberation.
our independence and liberation?
Yeah, kind of going back to something we covered before, in order to know how to move forward, you have to be properly oriented where you're coming from, you know, in order for us to really understand and really kind of like start to prepare ourselves to take the step forward, to make the moves that we need to make to move forward. We've got to have a complete understanding of how we got here, where we are today, understanding.
Or if we don't do that, what happens?
If we don't, then it's a shot in the dark in a lot of cases, you know. And part of the past is understanding ourselves, the enemy within,
Yes.
as well as the enemy without.
Yes.
If we
Good
don't learn
teaching.
from mistakes, we're gonna spend a lot of time
Good point.
going back over doing redos. And I don't know how much time that, you know, I'll put it this way. I feel as though, you know, like it's destined for us as a people to reemerge and to reclaim. But how long that process is going, what it's going to entail, and how long it's going to take, I think is going to depend a lot
We
on us.
determine that.
We're going to determine how easy that's going to be, you know, or how difficult and arduous and painful that's going to be.
And so you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, you're saying when you don't take the time to understand the relevance of history and how it relates to you and moving forward. You stumble in the dark, you make mistakes, you keep repeating the same patterns over and over, you get nowhere fast, and boom, here you are, still stuck in chains.
Yeah, like trying to basically trying to operate heavy machinery without reading the instruction manual. You know?
Wow.
You start and you be pretty much figuring it out as you go in a lot of cases. So.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, well, Ken, that's our Empower Hour. So,
All right. Well, thank you guys for having me. I enjoyed
yeah,
it.
Yes,
good stuff.
it's a
But we
good
can go
conversation.
on and
Yes.
on and on and
Oh,
on.
I
Yeah.
have a couple more questions, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, family, if you want to catch us, we every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. You can find Hanif and I right here on the Empower Hour, different topic. And then we also have a YouTube channel called Miss Free the People. That's MS Free the People. So if you can't catch us live and you want to catch any of our past episodes, just subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can get all the episodes right there at your fingertips. Please share the information. If Ken said something today that was impactful and that you learned something from, other people need to know this information as well. So we just ask that you share the information on your Facebook stream. We appreciate that.
Alrighty,
That's
until
it.
next time, next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Peace.
Take care of each other.
All right.